Hello, good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Jenny Wolfson, and I'm the Executive Director of Chicken and Egg Pictures. And we're delighted to host this conversation along with the Documentary Producers Alliance. We're a couple of minutes late, partly because I think my kid tried to hack into my phone and then froze it with the emergency thing popping up. So that's kind of ironic. But this is a subject near and dear to my heart. I am both a single working mother and also, at Chicken and Egg Pictures, we care really deeply about supporting women and gender nonconforming filmmakers. And we want to provide a framework for filmmakers to be able to continue making films, producing films, editing films, and be mothers at the same time. And we all know how difficult that is, because being working in the film industry is hard enough as it is, with grueling, intense schedules and shoots and travel and edits. And then on top of that, you're trying to work out, do you take your kids with you? Do you leave them behind? How do you pay for one or the other? And how do you kind of stay sane and do all the things that you have to do and then be creative at the same time? So I'm very excited about this conversation. I know many people have signed up, which just shows how much we need both solidarity, but also some solutions and some change in this area. And then, of course, on top of everything, with the pandemic and inequities, more out there than ever, even more challenges. So we are with you. I actually, just to wrap up before I introduce our moderator, I asked my son this evening, what's it like having a working mother? What's it like having a working mother in the film industry? And he looked at me blankly. Clearly, it was a question that was very hard to articulate the answer. So I would like to answer for him. I'm sure what he really wanted to say was, it is so inspiring to have a mum that supports women and gender nonconforming filmmakers who are making cinematic and compelling and critical films. And I love watching documentaries with you. That's what he would have said. And so without further ado, I would love to, I could see some smiling faces in the corner of our panelists. I would love to introduce the fabulous Susan Margolin, who is a beloved board member of Chicken and Egg Pictures, a producer, an active member of the Documentary Producers Alliance, and mother extraordinaire for those of you who see her beautiful posts on Facebook. So over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And I'm sure that's exactly what Quinn would have said. Exactly. You nailed it. Thank you for introducing me, Jenny, and thank you all for joining us this evening. As Jenny said, I'm a film entrepreneur turned producer who founded and ran a distribution company for over 2 decades. I'm now producing films full time, and I'm on the board, proud board member of Chicken and Egg Pictures and co-chair of the Waterfall Committee of the Doc Producers Alliance, or the DPA. The DPA is a co-host of this evening's panel, and it's a diverse coalition of more than 400 doc producers. We set standards for inclusive, sustainable, and equitable business practices, amplifying the voices of producers from around the world. I hope you'll visit us at docproducersalliance.org, and you'll find the link in the chat. I'm also a mom with 2 kids. This evening, I'd like to welcome our wonderful ASL interpreter, Sharon Pierre-Louis, and our 4 panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Loira Limbal. Loira is an Afro-Dominican filmmaker and DJ interested in the creation of art that is nuanced and revelatory for communities of color. She's the Senior Vice President of Programs at Firelight Media. Loira's current film, Through the Night, is a feature documentary about a 24-hour daycare center. Her film is a cinema verite portrait of 3 working New York mothers whose lives intersect at a 24-hour daycare center. A mother working the overnight shift as an essential worker at a hospital, another holding down 3 jobs to support her family, and a woman who for over 2 decades has cared for the children of parents with no one else to turn. The film is out theatrically now. Loira is a Sundance Institute Fellow and a former Ford Foundation Just Films Rockwood Fellow. She lives in the Bronx with her 2 children. Débora Souza Silva is a documentary filmmaker and journalist whose work examines systemic racism and inequality. Her work has been featured on PBS, BBC Brazil, Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting, and Fusion. Débora started her career as a TV reporter in Brazil before moving to California to pursue a master's in journalism at UC Berkeley. She's a former fellow at the Firelight Media Documentary Lab, the Chicken and Egg Pictures Accelerator Lab, and a member of the Studio 9 Advisory Council. Débora is also a recipient of the Creative Capital Awards, the New York NYT Institute Fellowship, the Investigative Reporting Program Fellowship, the Tribeca All Access Grant, the Center for Investigative Reporting and Glassbreaker Films Residency, and the NABJ's Les Payne Founders Award. Black Mothers is her debut film. Next is Nanfu Wang. Nanfu is originally from a remote village in China. She overcame poverty and a lack of access to formal education and eventually earned 3 master's degrees from Shanghai University, an MA in English Literature, an MA in Media Studies from Ohio University, and an MA in Documentary Filmmaking from NYU. She directed, produced, filmed, and edited feature documentaries Hooligan Sparrow, which was premiered at Sundance in 2016, I Am Another You, which premiered at South by Southwest in 2017, and One Child Nation, which premiered at Sundance in 2019. In her films, Nanfu creates intimate character studies that examine the impact of authoritarian governance, corruption, and lack of accountability on the lives of individuals and the well-being of communities. With the rigor of an investigative journalist and immersive, emotionally powerful storytelling, she interrogates notions of responsibility and freedom, particularly amid the repressive state mandates in her native China. Nanfu teaches cinematography and editing at NYU. That's in your spare time, Nanfu? And lives in New Jersey with her husband and 3-year-old son. Stephanie Wang-Breal uses film as a tool to subvert the narrative. Her work explores institutions and the people who reside at the core of these institutions. Stephanie's films include Wo Ai Ni Mami, which was in 2010 and awarded the Silver Docs Grand Jury Prize, the SFIAAFF Best Documentary Award, as well as an Emmy nomination. Tough Love was in 2014 and Blowin' Up was in 2018 and was a New York Times Critics' Pick and the Society of Authors Award winner at the Film des Femmes Festival. Each film was broadcast on POV. Stephanie is a co-founder of Once in a Blue Films, a female-run production company. Her work has been supported by the Sundance Institute, Ford Foundation, NISCA, and the Jerome Foundation. She's the recipient of a 2019 Chicken and Egg Artist Award, as well as a 2020 Creative Capital Artist Award and Guggenheim Fellowship. She's also a commercial director and has directed spots and image campaigns for Planned Parenthood, Minwax, Facebook, Apple, and Tiffany & Company. Stephanie currently resides in Brooklyn with her son and daughter. Did I get everybody? I think it's really important to actually take the time and introduce these incredible women. I know I could have just posted everybody's bios, but just for a moment, let's just soak in how accomplished and talented these brilliant women are. The pandemic has undone 3 decades of progress on gender equality. Unless you're privileged enough to pay for the labor of less privileged women, Parents are forced to navigate a confusing array of underfunded, poorly regulated schools, daycare, and after-school programs. The pandemic exposed the cracks in the system and the fact that there was no backup system or safety net to fall into. The very notion of finding work-life balance has become laughable for most mothers of young children. We all know that when unexpected family crises arise, mothers are expected to come to the rescue. And when the pandemic hit, mothers quit their jobs in large numbers. According to the New York Times, there were 1.6 million fewer mothers in the workforce this past fall than would have been expected when the schools across the country closed due to the pandemic. Childcare centers are also closing at a record pace around the country. According to a report from the Center for American Progress, the childcare crisis could cost women $64.5 billion in lost wages annually. Layer onto that the challenges facing independent documentary filmmakers. Even before the pandemic hit and the bulk of productions came to a screeching halt, we began to realize that the issues we were facing as filmmakers were due to systemic failures larger than ourselves, including unsustainable wage and labor practices, structural inequality, lack of development funds, and a debilitating lack of inclusion. I'd like to start our conversation with Loira and her beautiful film, Through the Night, because the film it's almost as if you had a crystal ball and you could see what was coming, Loira. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what your impetus was for making the film.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm still like sitting with all the statistics, like when you read them back to back, it's like, you know what you're dealing with on the home front, but then to hear all the statistics cumulatively, it's like really impactful. And then I immediately think about the things that those statistics don't even fully capture, which speaks to directly the part of the impetus for making Through the Night. Was thinking about the everyday realities and experiences of Black and Latina, low income and working class mothers, and how much of a tightrope it is to raise your kids in the United States. When you have the combination of racism, sexism, capitalism, right? All the isms stacked up against you. And for me, it came from the kind of motivation came from a very personal place because I was raised by a single working mother who worked the night shift as a home health aide. I raised 4 kids in New York City on minimum wage. And knowing her, her experience, but then also feeling like her story and the stories of other women like her are invisible. In our mainstream and our popular culture, but even in our movement spaces, I feel like oftentimes in feminist spaces, the mark is missed when it comes to the realities of lower income women of color, and certainly the labor movement often misses the mark. The face of labor in the United States is still very male, very white, and frankly, really out of touch with who makes up the labor force and what the needs and the issues are. And so, I learned about the daycare in the film through an article that I read. And when I read it, it brought up all these sort of issues and themes for me about a reality that I think is shared by so many women of color, yet so invisibilized. I'll say, the last thing I'll say on it is I was recently on a panel with human rights experts and activists from around the world focused on gender with an international lens. And one of the women on the panel really frankly said, even given my expertise and the fact that I work on, a 12-person team that focuses solely on gender. I had never heard about a 24-hour daycare center. And I thought that encapsulated, right, like so starkly just how much, right, is the conversation misses the realities of working class women of color. So that was the kind of impetus, and lots of other things, you know, went into it, and I was trying to achieve many other things, but I think that's probably you know, true to what the starting place was.
Thank you. Yes, the invisibility of those women, just, you know, I think we're so much, hopefully, more attuned to the invisibility of frontline workers. And I'd like to go to Nanfu and ask, so Nanfu, you were making films before you had your son. You've achieved amazing success and are in great demand as an award-winning filmmaker. In fact, you have a new film coming this week at Sundance in the same breath, premiering. Can you tell us what's changed for you as a filmmaker since you became a parent, and what adjustments, creative or otherwise, if any, have you had to make to your approach to filmmaking?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how like everyone is, but the first year of my son's life was so difficult. It was just like very little sleep. And then I'm like confessing to everyone here, my son is 3.5 now, and he still doesn't sleep through the night. And then we're talking about through the night. No, there is no through the night. And he wakes up like at midnight every night and come to my bed and still. And it's really challenging. And the first year of his life, and I was making One Child Nation, the film was part of inspired because of the pregnancy and because of him as well. But it did make me think a lot about just how becoming a mother and being a mother changed the style and even the types of film that I can make now. Before I had my son, I could go anywhere and live anywhere for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And I could move just physically and live with my subject. And I did that with like living on the streets for a movie about a homeless guy. And that will never, I think, or will not happen, at least in the near future. I think about how long is the longest I can leave my son for work. And the longest that I've done so far is 2 weeks. And even that 2 weeks, I feel like I was so cruel and like full of guilt and thinking, was it right? Well, you know, but then I did like several 2 weeks of trip. But I felt like that was the longest. I haven't broken the record yet, but that limits the types of films like I would want to spend weeks and then even months with subject and with a film. And I would think maybe I can do that again once he's bigger enough, maybe in a year, yeah, maybe in a year or two, that I can take him with me and do that. But I don't know. I haven't gotten to that point yet. So I'm also curious to hear from, you know, Stephanie and Loida, who have kids that are older than mine, and just like, how do you do it? Do you take them and and that's, I would say that's the biggest change in terms of filmmaking for me. Yeah.
Stephanie, Loida, do either of you want to speak to that question? Okay.
Stephanie, if you wanna, do you wanna? I mean, I can say, you know, my kids are now 8 and 9, and you know, I think for me, there's the added piece around like that the added kind of factor is, or the biggest factor for me, not the added factor in my case, is that I'm a single parent and I'm a sole provider. And so, you know, I have felt like I need to keep a full-time job in order to provide, you know, stability, you know, for my children. You know, my mother's household also depends on me. So I have, you know, younger and older people depending on me financially. And so that does really, you know, dictate what I can do and how I can do it. You know, not just from a kind of logistical or time perspective, but from a financial perspective. And I think, you know, there's been so much talk for so many years about how notoriously unsustainable documentary filmmaking is. I think, you know, we often talk about it without the factor or the layer of parents or parenting really being part of the conversation. We kind of just have a general conversation about documentary filmmaking as very unsustainable. But what that means, you know, in my case, and I don't say this to complain in any way, but what it meant for me was that I had to make my film on my third shift. You know, I have my children, I work a full-time job, and then literally in the nights and the weekends and holidays is when I made through the night. And I deeply want to continue making films. I don't know if I could do that again, you know. I was burnt out at the end of making through the night, and now with the pandemic, I'm extremely burnt out. You know, so then it raises the question for me of all the people that the unsustainability of the field forces out completely, right? Because if you are a mother, if you are a single mother, right, who has to provide, you're gonna choose the job that's gonna, you know, provide the stability. You're not gonna choose your passion. And then, you know, we as a society lose out on the voices that we need to hear from the most, you know? And so that question of sustainability, I think without that lens of motherhood and parenting, you know, again, it sometimes feels like an incomplete conversation.
Absolutely.
I was just going to add,
Yes.
sorry about the delay. I was just going to add, you know, all my films are based in New York for a reason. You know, I can't really travel. I can't work on a project like I would love to in other places. Because like you said, Nanfu, it's really hard to be away for more than 2 weeks. And I, like Laura, am a single mom, but luckily my ex co-parents, so I can, when I do have to plan a shoot, I can plan it so that he's taking care of them while I travel for a few days. But I have a few days window as well to plan my production and try to, you know, jam everything in. And I also think that during the pandemic, it was a real moment of crisis for us because he has a shop. And so I said, you go keep your shop open and I will fully take care of the kids' remote schooling. I decided that that was more important. And I just decided I wasn't going to work because I couldn't try to work and do 2 kids remote schooling and be a short order cook and be a house cleaner and be a piano teacher without losing my mind and my temper. So, you know, I definitely made a huge sacrifice at the beginning of the pandemic. And by June, I was sort of going crazy because I didn't have that creative outlet that feeds my soul so much, that I get so much out of, that makes me, in fact, I think, a better parent, a better person, period. So it was a real challenge.
That is actually a segue to the question I wanted to ask you, Stephanie, which is, you know, where as mothers, as, you know, many people ask me, you know, is the panel mothering in the film industry literal or figurative? And I thought that that was, you know, so perfect because of course it's both, right? But, you know, a question that I wanted to ask you, Stephanie, was, you know, how do you, you know, kind of address self-care. I think that we're all, kind of juggling a million, million things, and kind of, we know that women are the backstop. That you did exactly what a mother does. You jumped in, you took over, you sacrificed, and you sacrificed the thing that you love most. The creative work that you love most and are passionate about. So, can you speak a little bit about, and what, after Stephanie, I'd love to hear from others, how you manage, and balance, and think about your kind of mental well-being.
I think that's a great question, especially because I've made so many films about families and different kinds of families. And I think that you carry, not the trauma, but you carry the challenges and the vulnerabilities that families face from your work into your home. And sometimes I would give my children a hard time because I was just like, you have it so good. You have so much. And I think that, understanding the different hats we wear as we are mothering all the time. Like you said, we're mothering at home, we're mothering in our work, we're mothering with our crews, we're mothering with our subjects, because they're not just subjects, they're real people who we care immensely about. One thing that I really loved in Laura's film through the night was when the nurse practitioner who said, what does she need? And she was just like, rest. And I was just like, oh, I felt that so strongly, because I think that I just try to go to bed when my kids go to bed. Because if I stay up working, then when they wake up in the morning at 6:30 or earlier, I'm tired still. And I'm not as good of a person to be around. So I've started trying to get more sleep, because I do think that sleep is a restful pattern where everything stops and we can restore ourselves. And I also think getting outside as much as possible and just being with nature right now is something that I try to make my kids do, especially with the screens that we're all being bombarded with in a way that our society has never dealt with. I'm really honestly fearful of the trauma that my children are going to face. Today, my son said to me, Mom, did you ever use anything that you learned in school in real life? I was just like, yes, but right now I can understand why you're asking me that question.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add on the self-care question, and add and any advice for other moms out there?
Yeah, I think I can add to that. I think that being a mother has definitely brought me a lot of challenges, in making my film, but it also made me a much better professional. I just learned how to embrace that I'm doing the best that I can. The circumstance that I'm given right now, it's incredibly challenging to work under this pandemic when you have a kid at home and you have to do so much work. But I had to learn how to prioritize better, right? To say no for things that are not helping me to move forward with my career or my project. And also a couple other things that I learned, like asking for help. I have a team, who helped me for the documentary, but now more than ever, I learned to reach out to them to ask help. Like there are days that I show up to production meetings and I just have 3 or 4 hours of sleep. My baby is still very young, he's 20 months old now, 21 months old, but even when the pandemic started, he was just a year old, and I was still really like spending, nights like with just a few hours of sleep. And, I just learned to be real to my feelings as well, and feeling that it's okay sometimes to show up to a production meeting and tell to your teammates that, I just had a few hours of sleep. I'm very tired. And what you get in return is like kindness. People learn to be more kind to you. And at the end of the day, that's what we mothers need, right? Is kindness and funding as well, of course.
So, Deborah,
Can I say,
back to you. Oh, yes, go ahead,
I'm
please.
just gonna say something about the self-care thing, because I think that's a hard one. Like for me, the terminology of self-care is not very like resonant. I feel some sort of like resistance to it. And I'm working through that because I do know that I need care. I need to take care of myself. I need to ask for care, right? And that I'm like worthy of care. But I think that there is something, in the United States sort of paradigm where, being a filmmaker, you're an artist, right? And so you are already within a space that is not valued. The arts in the US are not valued. Point blank, it's seen as something, it's a luxury or a hobby. It's superfluous. It's not necessary. I obviously completely disagree with that, and you could sort of see in the beginning of the pandemic, what everyone turned to was precisely art, right? To get through this crisis. And that's what we're all still turning to. So it's absolutely, right, essential to the human experience, but we live in a society that treats it as some sort of, luxury or afterthought. And so to do it already, I think even if for me, like, even though I'm conscious of that, there is a part of me that has bought into that, right? Where it's like, well, I'm so lucky, I'm so blessed that I am able to do this thing that I love, because I know so many people are not able to do it. And it does feel like such a luxury, right? And such a privilege. And so you have that on the one hand, right? Like, that internal thing over here, which runs counter to you feeling like you can say anything or need anything or want anything or complain about anything because you're lucky and you're privileged. And then on the other hand, as a mother, the paradigm is certainly one where, like, to be a good mother in the United States is basically to be a martyr. Once you're a mother, you're not really supposed to have your own passions, and if you do pursue your passions, you're judged, and critiqued, and people question you, and, well, really, this is, keeping you away from your children, and I don't know, and right. And so then you have that on this other side, like, working in your brain. And so it's like the perfect storm of things telling you that your needs don't matter. You combine the two, and it's very hard to get to that place where you are able to prioritize taking care of yourself, and like Débora said, like, asking for help. I've certainly felt like, I'm supposed to be able to do this all by myself. And if I can't, then there's something wrong with me, because I feel like that's like a lot of the messaging, in our culture still around, mothering. And so, and as you see in a moment like this, and, this moment just makes it plain, the pandemic makes it plain, but this is just an exacerbation of pre-existing conditions, right? Where, like, everybody's supposed to figure it out on their own. Mm-hmm. There's no social safety net, childcare is not seen as a public good. Like, it is a public good. So many people need it, right? Like, it's a public good, like the post office or like public education, but it's not seen that way, So from birth to 5 years of age, you're just supposed to figure that out on your own,
Yeah, and I agree with you, Loida. And that's why, right? I think one of the biggest lessons during this pandemic is just to I learned how to embrace that what I'm doing is the best I can under the current circumstances, because this is so hard. You know, what we are living right now, it's so hard. One thing that I used to really feel a lot was guilt, right? When my son was born, and, you know, I had to continue doing my film, otherwise, you know, I would be behind. And I remember just like watching rough cuts and like, you know, while I'm like, you know, breastfeeding and like taking notes, giving notes to my editor, and it's completely hard. And I would feel guilt, you know, an incredible sense of guilt. But I also, you know, I figured that if that's what I can do as, you know, as a filmmaker now, this is the time I have. I can feel, in one hand, I need to take like self-care, I need to take breaks, but on the other hand, also allow me, this is the situation that I have for me in order to make my film. I don't have that perfect, you know, when you imagine you editing your film, you think like you are at an office with big screen, like, you know, just yourself doing your work, but that was not the situation that I had. And I just learned to embrace that this is what I can give right now as an artist, and just embrace that's okay. This is not the perfect situation, but that's okay.
That's so important. So Nanfu, Stephanie, and, you know, Loira, and Débora, anybody, you know, we recognize that that the situation is really unsustainable, and I wonder if, you know, you all, any of you have any thoughts about, you know, what can be done. You know, certainly, you know, Chicken and Egg does, you know, wonderful things to, you know, bring the community together, as does, you know, the DPA and, you know, some other, Sundance, and some other wonderful organizations that we're blessed with in this industry. But on a broader scale, you know, clearly we need more sustainable, progressive policies. And I wonder if, you know, if we're thinking, you know, kind of big and expansively, you know, what can be done specifically to help documentary filmmakers who are mothering.
I can start just sharing a little experience. I think I remember when my son was 2 months old and 4 months old, in both circumstances, I needed to attend festivals, and I was struggling because my husband has work, and then I just couldn't bring, he was so young and I had to take him. And that was when I started looking at the festivals. Do they have childcare? And there were some actually started doing that. And I think that's one thing that, what if like all festivals or events can provide free childcare to the filmmakers and people who are attending, and that could help a lot for them. And then another experience that I had was when I was traveling for One Child Nation, and later when the film was out too. I had to, it's like when I traveled, you know, at home there is a child and we had to hire childcare to take care of that. And a lot of those, I think, whether it's during production or post-production or release, that people, the funders or, you know, the distributors, they're not thinking about that. But that's part of the cost too. And what if filmmakers who have kids that are under 5, I mean, I don't know the age, but like Loira made a good point that when you are from birth to 5, those are the period of time that you have to figure out yourself. But what if as a filmmaker, we can budget like childcare, some part of the shooting days of the childcare days into your budget for production if you are a mother and you just have a baby. And the funders can take that into account and the distributors can take that into account. I think that would be helpful too. So we didn't have to, work at the same time and then spending part of that salary hiring and figuring out at home, both emotionally and financially, is a burden. So I think that,
Great idea.
yeah, those are the two things that I can think of for now.
I would add
You can go ahead.
unions. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
I'm a member of the
Stephanie.
WGA now, and the benefits, I actually have benefits for the first time, and it's less costly, but I ask that every production that I do become a signatory, and it's hard for them. But I also think it would be great for the DPA, for the DG and Chicken and Egg and all the organizations to talk to the DGA and the WGA about, what are the standards for, why aren't documentary filmmakers being included? What are the standards for documentary filmmakers? What is it making it hard? Because so many women, if you don't have a spouse whose insurance you can go on, it's up to you. And health insurance is such a big part of our everyday monthly basic income, what we need to take care of. So I think that if we could, form a way of getting more sort of a safety net for women so that we can provide for our families, not coming out of our, line budget, which also we need to take taxes out of, we need to take all this stuff out of, but at the end of the day, it leaves us with very little. I think that would be, just tremendously helpful. And also just like a feeling of security that we're covered.
Great idea. How about universal basic income for raising children? That would be another thing I would add.
Yeah, I would want to add, I think about it, I think Nanfu and Stephanie have provided like super great concrete things. But I also think about it in terms of in this moment where everything is collapsing in the United States, where we now really understand how cruel and inhumane and unsustainable all of our systems are. It's a moment to expand our imaginations, and this country has told us that it is impossible, untenable, to provide a safety net for working people. And we, by and large, believe it, and we normalize, for example, and Through the Night, Shanona, who's a pediatric ER nurse, works a night shift. She gets about 3 to 4 hours of sleep a day. Marisol, who is working 3 jobs because none of her employers want to give her full-time hours, so precisely so that they don't have to pay for benefits, gets about 3-4 hours of sleep a night. Nunu and Patrick, who care for their children, get about 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. This has been their reality. This is not due to COVID-19, right? And so we have arrived at a point in the United States where sleep is something that like only the lucky ones get access to, and these are people that are, doing sort of everything, quote unquote, everything right. They're doing what society tells you to do. If you work hard, you'll be fine. And instead, what we do is crush them, and make it so that they are not even able to sleep, and so it's like, well, if you can't sleep, then when do you dream, and it's very perverse what we've normalized, and we all interact with Marisol. Marisol is your supermarket clerk. Marisol is the person that is working at Target when you go to Target at midnight. We see these people, we depend on them. Now we know that we depend on them, we call them essential workers, but we've normalized this way of life, and we have believed what the politicians, and which is beyond whether it's Democrat or Republican, because again, this is like decade after decade, and it doesn't matter who's in office. We never take care of a Marisol or a Shanona or a Nunu or a Patrick, and now it's like very clear that if we don't take care of them, there is no future, there is no recovery, there is no way forward. The empire is just going to collapse. And so I think, it's a moment of like, our imaginations have to grow. We have to want more, demand more, dream much bigger. You know, if Nuno and Patrick are able to, two individuals, one family, provide the social safety net that the government refuses to an entire community for over 2 decades, then I have to believe that it is possible to take care of people, you know, and that's like the example. Nuno and Patrick, they provide childcare, but they provide so many other things, you know, to all of the families that are part of their community. So while politicians are telling us that they can't do it, here are Nuno and Patrick doing it. And that's, you know, that's certainly the case across communities of color, across undocumented communities, queer and trans communities, the people that the government has always neglected and harmed, right? You know, so the examples exist. I feel like the added thing I would say is, you know, we all collectively have to expand our imaginations, you know, around what's possible, dream much, much bigger, much more radical, and also shift our ideas of who our leaders are and what leadership looks like. You know, to me, Nuno and Patrick are the leaders. They are the people that have been providing the things that working families need, despite the government, not because of it, you know, and with very little support of, you know, of the government. So, and I think that applies, you know, across the board. So, you know, you say universal basic income, I'm like, yes, for artists, for mothers, you know, for everybody, paid family leave, healthcare, like all the things, you know, that we're seeing, again, that without this thing is really literally gonna collapse.
Yeah, great advice. So recognize greatness for what it is, sleep more, and dream bigger. It's profound words. With that, I'd like to introduce Robin Hessman, filmmaker and proud member of the DPA. We're proud to have her. And Robin's going to tell us a little bit about a group that she founded. Robin?
Hi, everybody. I was involved a little bit behind the scenes and putting this panel together as part of the DPA. But in 2013, I believe it was, when I had just had my second child, filmmaker Jesse Epstein and I were struggling to figure out how to reconcile exactly what Nanfu was talking about. After being used to traveling the world and spending months apart, how to live in our new realities as filmmakers and parents. So we created this group. It's a fairly informal group called DocuMamas, and our frequency of meeting has definitely fluctuated over the years, but it is really a support. One thing that's come through for me from listening to this conversation is how we are going through so many of the same things and we're all alone in our silos. And having had these conversations and even struggling with decisions, like I had 2 kids under 2, can I really go to Sundance for 4 days instead of 3? It was a conversation with this group of DocuMamas that made me realize their lives were not going to end if I went for 4 days instead of 3. So on the one hand, this has been a group where we've come together to just kind of get that emotional support that we need and figure out that other people are in the same boat and figure out how to make some of the trade-offs that we might need to. But we also have, it is the opportunity once we come together for the emotional part to actually do some advocacy work. And it's something we've also talked about. How do we, lobby film festivals for childcare? These ideas are, lobby panels. When I was speaking at universities with one of my films, I would ask each time if they would make sure there would be a grad student to watch my kid. So I traveled speaking with my baby and made sure there was a grad student there available to babysit. But in any case, DocuMamas is fairly informal. We have a Google group. We had been only in New York and meeting in person, but with this new Zoom world, it really is an opportunity to expand for documentary filmmaking mothers to have wider conversations. We are next, I think in the chat, my email address is going to be there. If anyone is interested in coming to the next DocuMamas Zoom group, email me and you will get the Zoom invite. It is going to be Sunday, February 28th at 8 p.m. We often have met the last Sunday of the month in the evening after most kids' bedtimes. So please, if you want, come and join DocuMamas. And it is really a group that is what we make of it. And if we want it to become something more active advocacy role, we can do that. And if we need it for advice and for emotional support to make those tough decisions, it's also there for that too. So just wanted to let people know that this exists out there and we can make it something bigger and more with more people who want to be a part of it.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Robin. And we would also encourage people to check out the DPA, Documentary Producers Alliance.org online, and you consider becoming a member and come to some meetings. It's a great gathering space for the filmmaking community. So the first question is from Sharon Shattuck. Are there any resources for freelance documentary filmmakers expected in New York State? I assume paid family leave isn't a thing for freelancers. Could we qualify for short-term disability? I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. Anyone? It might be, a little specific to New York State, but Sharon, I can try to look into that through the DPA, and maybe you can leave your email, and I can try to get back to you on that. The next question is from Leela Meadow-Connor. How can we collectively advocate for more funding for mothers and caregivers whose careers have been affected by this other hat we wear? Who are funders who might be receptive to supporting this?
So one initiative that I'm very proud to be a part of is from Studio 9. It's called Mother Grant. It's a new grant specifically for to cover childcare costs for mothers when they are either shooting their films or editing. But we just closed one round of this, the first applications, and they are about to open a new one sometime soon. So I encourage you to just keep check on the website, and I know it's a small initiative, we just started, but it's supposed to open more, and I hope that these opportunities just continue to grow, right? We need more organizations coming forward and supporting women or mothers specifically for childcare costs, because this is it's costly, it's a challenge that we face.
And great. Oh, please. And Robin, do you want to speak to the idea of putting childcare in the budgets and the idea that you mentioned? Thanks.
Sure. I just was going to say that, I believe it was the 2018 election, Luba Gretchen Shirley, I believe, if I'm not getting her name wrong, she was running for Congress, and she got official permission for the money that she was raising for her congressional campaign to be used for childcare. And it is something that we can create as a norm as filmmakers, to have funders as you're raising money, if you're raising money from individual donors and foundations, that this is a legitimate line item in a budget. If it can go for a congressional race where this money is raised to allow this person to do the work, I think it's a terrific idea that we can run with to make something that is accepted. Let mothers do the work and have support for childcare.
Wonderful.
I also just want to say,
yeah, go ahead. Please.
Sorry, that Deborah, I actually just was found out I was a recipient of the Studio 9 grant, the first one. So I'm very excited about that. But also Chicken and Egg, I know that they have mother sort of really fun going on, as well as I believe Field of Vision has put forward efforts to help artists, not specifically mothers, but artists during this challenging time. And they had a few rounds. So I would say look into those organizations as well, in terms of organizations that are supporting women right now.
Yeah, I would also add again to, I think as a field, we've had the conversation about unsustainability for a really long time. And we have a lot of data. And so it's like, now it's just time to act, and yes, it's childcare, but it's not just childcare, because if you can't even get into the field because you're not independently wealthy, or you don't have a spouse, who's gonna hold you down, it's not just a matter of getting childcare for you to go on a shoot. It's a matter of who we're keeping out of this field, who, again, in my opinion, are the people that we absolutely need to hear the most from, particularly as we're in this moment of like culture wars and, the battle for the soul of the nation and all the things that are like going on. This is not something that we can afford. We can't keep moving forward the way that we have, right? Like the status quo does not work. So, again, it's like, we know that it's unsustainable. And so again, if you're not in a position where you can weather that unsustainability, then you are not going to be in the field at all, whether you're a mother or part of any other community, right, that's historically marginalized. And so I think it's really just like time to act. I think like asking funders for childcare is the tip of the iceberg, but I also feel like we can be more radical, and what we're asking, what if, funding wasn't project-based? What if it was more filmmaker-centric, focused on the individual, the artist, in a more holistic manner, right? There's all these programs, diversity pipelines this and diversity pipelines that. With this pandemic, and all the careers that are being set back, who's going to be around in 5 years? Who's going to be able to weather this crisis? It's going to be the people that were already in the most privileged, financial position. So all these diversity programs, whether they're for women or for people of color or for, whatever, all these people that we've supported we're not going to see these faces in 5 to 10 years. If we don't get more radical about how we support people, if we value documentaries, we have to value documentary filmmakers, and fund accordingly,
I just love what Loida said, because those are the voices that we really need to hear from now, are those people who are not able to finish their films or are quitting their filmmaking careers because they cannot, progress with their films. And I think it's not going to be just a loss for these artists. It's going to be a loss for the whole industry, and also for the audiences that are not going to see these films made. So yeah, everything comes back to funding. And I totally think that this is the problem, is the lack of funding, lack of support.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that we have a moment to thank the people who were involved in producing tonight's panel. Erin Owens, Nicole Docta, Robin Hessman, Marilyn Ness, Lucila Moctezuma, Sabine Fayu-Cantillo, Morgan Hultquist, and of course our ASL interpreter, Sharon Pierre-Louis. Does anybody have any last words of wisdom or pearls of wisdom, since we're talking about moms, that they'd like to add?
I want to say something. I just want to say to all the people doing the work of mothering to just keep like complaining, keep demanding, keep sounding the alarm, because in this moment, I feel like every meeting that I'm on, everyone sympathizes with like, oh my God, I don't know how you're doing it, as they see my kids like coming in and out and I'm like doing third grade math or whatever. And everybody's like, oh, I don't know how you're doing it. But the expectations of our productivity haven't changed. Everybody still expects all the same things from us. So there's this dissonance, I feel, where there's this thing that's out in plain sight, and then but we're still like, trying to produce in the same way, which I think is gonna lead all of us to have nervous breakdowns, So just keep sounding the alarm, be the person that makes people uncomfortable on the call. It makes me think about the Zora Neale Hurston quote that says, if you are silent about your pain, they will kill you and say that you enjoyed it. And I think that is really applicable to the experiences of mothers in this pandemic.
Beautiful.
Well, and as we are all used to say, right, it takes a village to raise a child. I like to add that it takes a village to make a film. And, being a new mother and a first-time filmmaker, I'm really hopeful that, our village of supporters will only continue to grow. I happen to be fortunate and have amazing organizations supporting my work, but we need more filmmakers to be supported. And I think we can be successful filmmakers while we are being successful mothers, whatever success means to you as a mother. I think we should be allowed to do both.
Beautiful.
And I'll just add one last thing, because I have a daughter who you see keep popping in her head because she wants to get on the internet. What Laura says is like, we need to keep raising the alarm, because we have little ones coming up behind us who see us and see what we're doing, and they're going to inherit all that we're creating or not creating. And so I just feel like it's so important to, give them a pathway to a better life where they can choose to be a mother and a filmmaker and not ever question that.
Beautiful, beautiful words. Well, with that, I'd like to thank our panelists, and thank you, Chicken and Egg and DPA for hosting this evening. And thank you all for joining us for this wonderful conversation.